Good evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us here on Hilaal TV, TSTV channel 347. In the coming weeks, the national dialogue will be taking place, and my guest that is going to be joining me is somebody who actually had written about having a discussion like this on a national level. Of course, the country is going through a lot of difficult times at this very moment, but as South Africans, there's always a room to go ahead and have these dialogues to path a way forward. So joining me, I'd like to welcome Mohammed Dangor, who was a former ambassador to Syria, Libya and Saudi Arabia, and of course is a struggle stalwart and was active in the fight against apartheid. Ambassador, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and jazakallah so much for joining us.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for allowing me to share some of my thoughts with some of your listeners and viewers. I think it is important that we look at the national dialogue as an opportunity to review what we had done in the past, to review what we had done in the Constitution, to reprioritize it, reformulate it, and create policy emerging from the national dialogue to input into the state to take up. Now, I want to take one example. Previously, there was a conference hosted by the faith-based communities prior to 1994. And the conclusion of that was that it created a document called the Rights and Obligations of Believers in a Future South Africa. Importantly, what was adopted in that particular conference is what you find in the Bill of Rights today.
Right. Ambassador, I want to touch on your original thought that happened, I seem to be corrected, 2 years ago. Obviously, at the time, nobody would have foreseen a government of national unity being formed. Nobody would have seen a multi-party ruling government. What were your original thoughts at the time to go ahead and path this way forward in order to make sure that consensus is seen across the entire country?
I served in a constituency that had all matters of people, all colors, all races, all classes. And I could see the contradictions emerging amongst them, even within the movement. And I had to actually talk to the activists within the movement to say to them, listen, comrades and colleagues, we have to actually look at this issue and we have to take forward this issue as patriotic, united South Africans. That the emergence of narrow nationalism, which isolates some of the minority groups, which has led to the emergence of the PA and Al-Jamaa, the one being racist and the other one being sectarian. And to bring back the ethos of a non-racial, non-sexist, non-sectarian democratic South Africa now. I could see signs emerging that I'd observed both in Syria and Lebanon and in Libya prior, and I don't call them revolutions that happened there. I call them uprisings. They actually were uprisings against particular issues, but it was not a revolution. A revolution seeks to change an entire society. What you've got there is failed states.
And one would assume that this national dialogue has to address the matters of us turning into a failed state. We're not there as yet. I don't think we are, even though there are naysayers saying that we are a failed state. Well, I don't think we are, because we still have electricity. Yes, there's a bit of a water crisis that we're going through right now, but infrastructure is still working to a certain extent. So one would assume that this dialogue here allows for there to be a way to make sure we don't reach that level of what we saw in North Africa during the Arab Spring.
You know, more importantly, I think what we need to do is band South Africans together in a patriotic sense. In 1994, there was a government of national unity. And interestingly enough, the Progs were not part of that. The National Party became part of that. Because the National Party were Afrikaners who didn't see themselves with second passports, who saw themselves as making South Africa wanting to work together with the ANC, the PAC, and others. They may have been racists, but they were patriots. And they did not owe their allegiance to some foreign Western ideology. They've changed, I think, to a certain extent now. They've also arranged themselves. Of course, they also had connections then in a particular way. But they were more patriotic South Africans than the Progs were.
But here's the thing, Ambassador. I mean, you talk about, obviously, the Afrikaners. I mean, we've just seen a mass exodus of them leaving.
They've not left. It's not a mass exodus.
No,
it's
but
49.
I mean, yeah, but I'm saying in terms of the continuation, given that you've got Donald Trump signing this executive order, they're going to use any excuse to say, there's sort of like a white genocide that is occurring, which is proven to be false. So how do we allow for that to say it stops right over there? No,
basically we need to persuade people. That's in their own interest. And of course people will always act in their own self-interest. Now, having said that, there's no mass movement of Afrikaners. There's 49 families. It's not a mass movement. I mean, there are millions of Afrikaners in South Africa. And actually the word Afriforum, it denotes that they have a link and an identity to Africa.
Africa, yeah. Yeah, of course.
But in saying that, I think what we need to do is go back to the time of the Freedom Charter. And the Freedom Charter, in one of its clauses, formulated that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Further, principles and discussions were adopted by the patriotic forces in the Harare Declaration that spelled out the modalities for the struggle and the basis for negotiations. That South Africa shall become a united, democratic, non-racial state. South Africa shall become a united, democratic, non-racial state, stated once again, but non-racial, united state, not federal state. Now, there are some people who talk about a devolution of powers, and that devolution of powers, I think, is going to lead to a separate state in the minds of some people. I hope that does not happen. That's why this dialogue is important, so that we don't get to that particular position.
Okay, Ambassador, I want to come there too. And of course, you've mentioned the Freedom Charter. But when I look at towns like Orania, and I interviewed somebody from Orania a couple of weeks ago who says, even though we see ourselves as South Africans, we have this town which we'd like to separate ourselves from the rest of South Africa, number one. I then had Jackie Soroke from the Pan-African Congress, and he penned a letter in the Soweto the day after the Freedom Charter, the anniversary of the Freedom Charter. And he said, the problem with the Freedom Charter is when you mention South Africa belongs to all that live in it, these are his words, business interests, corporate interests, white interests then takes over because the land is still in the hands of the few. So how do we then say, okay, let's go ahead and have this united South Africa, but the problem is the resources are not in the hands of the majority. So how do we then take that conversation forward?
One of the issues that need to be discussed at this national dialogue is the redress of the issues that people were denied of during apartheid. One of that is the land issue. Now, Section 25 of the Constitution actually deals with the land issue. Now, what people that are going to go to this national dialogue would have to review, is Section 25, is it still appropriate? Should it still be used? Should it be reformulated to redress the question of land? Now, of course, we've seen what has happened in South Africa over the last 30 years. That the majority of the population has taken political power, but they've not taken economic power.
Yes.
Now, unless we redress that particular issue, there's going to be a second social revolution. It is important that be addressed at the national dialogue. Now, the national dialogue is calling upon, all these motive forces in South Africa to come together, whether it be the trade union movement, whether it be the business community, whether it be the faith-based communities, whether it be civic society within locals, they should get together, formulate their thoughts in their own conferences, so that when they go to the national conference, they go with the thoughts and views and mandate of the communities that they, saying that they in fact represent.
I think let's take a break because I think you need to have some water, Ambassador Dangor. After the break, we'll continue the conversation with him. We're going to be touching on the role of our ulama and how they can play in terms of the national dialogue. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to News in Focus. I'm still in conversation with Mohammed Dangor, who was the former ambassador to Syria, Libya and Saudi Arabia. Ambassador, I want to touch on the role of our ulama here in South Africa. Of course, you were there along with Ibrahim Rasool, Maulana Ibrahim Bam, many other ulama that were involved in, firstly, of course, our transition into democracy. How important was it for them at that time to play such a huge role, given Islam has such a rich history, 300 years of it within the country?
I think the first conference that was held, and it was by and large organized by the Call of Islam. Unfortunately, the Call has become much smaller and less influential. Sorry about this.
No problem, no problem.
It brought together all the ulama bodies in what we then called the National Muslim Conference, which happened at the University of the Western Cape, which adopted principles of non-racialism, non-sexism, democratic state, and participation as patriots within the South African state. Of course, this led and was part of a faith-based conference that included the South African Council of Churches, the South African Bishops' Conference, some Jewish elements led by Dr. Franz Auerbach, and the Hindu community led by people like Ella Gandhi and Yasmin Sukha. In fact, there was an organization called, and linked to a Geneva-based organization called the World Conference of Religion and Peace. At that particular point in time, I was the vice president, Yasmin Sukha was the vice president, Reverend Bishop Butit Lakhali was the president. Rashid Omar, Imam Rashid Omar was the secretary, which also played a pivotal role in formulating and facilitating and bringing about that interfaith conference. That interfaith conference, I think, influenced what we have in the Bill of Rights today.
Sure.
The resolutions taken at that particular point in time was adopted by the state within the Constitution.
Yes.
Now,
the national dialogue now,
yeah.
Obviously it's quite open. There are certain panelists that are going to be involved. For example, Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman from Gift of the Givers. How does ulama get involved here?
Okay.
Yeah.
The panelists are facilitators.
Okay.
They are not going to lead or they'll be the lead participants. The lead participants will be the South African society.
Sure.
And the motive forces that exist within South African society today. That includes the faith-based organizations, and consequently that means that the ulama bodies will be involved. And not only the ulama, but the whole of Muslim society, maybe it's the Benoni Football Club that can come along with a particular position. But to feed into that faith-based organizations that they represent, because there are also various, the UXA and others. There are other ulama bodies as well, smaller ones. But UXA importantly. And it's up to them to actually facilitate the Muslim conference first to decide upon these matters, to look at the policies that were adopted, to review them, to reformulate them, and to make proposals to the national dialogue to take forward into the organs of the state.
I think both you and I can agree, Ambassador, that Islam, the rich history, alhamdulillah, we have freedom of religion, which allows us the opportunity to go ahead and have discussions like this on an Islamic channel. We can go to masjid for Jummah. We can host events in solidarity with Palestine and all other oppressed people in the world. We are allowed those opportunities. But is there, in your view, is there any improvements that we as Muslims and the ulama would need to say, let's take it to this national dialogue so that we can not only better ourselves, but allow ourselves to improve our fellow South Africans?
Let me take some of the contentious issues. The Bella Bill was adopted in the 6th Parliament that I was part of. The NHI was adopted in the 6th Parliament that I was part of. What is their attitude towards the Bella Bill? What is the faith-based views regarding the NHI and all other matters? Sorry about this.
No problem.
But what is the role of faith-based communities in a future South Africa? Are they going to adopt a position that they are patriotic South Africans, united in trying to resolve the problems of South Africa? Or, unfortunately, I want to appeal to the DA to become part of this.
But they don't want to be part of it.
No. The reason is they are playing political theatrics. Political theatrics is not going to assist South Africa. Political theatrics is not going to assist the ANC. It will not assist the PAC. Those are the historical movements. It will not, whether are the Azapos of this world that played an important role during the Black consciousness movement at that time, they should be part and parcel of what is going to happen in the future South Africa. So, but this conference must not be a political party conference. It must be the motor forces of society. That is, the health committees, the social committees, the faith-based organizations, the trade unions, the business communities, all of those and others need to actually look at what we have done over the last 30 years. And prior to that, and now we adopt those issues and say we are reviewing these positions. For example, you raised the question of the PAC raising the question of South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Is that still a relevant issue?
Sure.
Should that be discussed? And should we be taking that forward? Of course, I would motivate for it, but it's that conference that must decide how we take it forward.
You've mentioned this should not be a political party.
Yeah.
Now, herein lies the issue, and this is where I have a challenge, because all the political parties are going to want to raise up their hand and say, it's us who are going to be making the bold decisions. Let me tell you why, because when we saw, of course, the potential tax hike, it was political parties that were standing up and saying, we want it, instead of saying, let's think of the citizen, because the VAT hike was going to be detrimental to every single one of us. So how do the civil societies, faith-based organizations say, we need to take charge? Because for too long, citizens have not been listened to. It's always been about political parties, and it's across the board. How do the citizens say, listen to us first, and only us, because we are the ones that are suffering on the ground, that understand what's going on the ground, and are paying the price for mistakes that have been made by political parties?
I don't want to enter into the debate of the tax debate. It's a side issue.
No, but I'm saying is that the political parties raised their hands and said it was us, instead of thinking about the citizens first.
It's really a side issue. You've got to balance the budget somehow.
No, of course, sure.
Otherwise, you can either cut off social spending or you can do other things. That's what budgets are for. But what I'm talking here is about a common vision. A vision of one united South Africa, where we are all patriots wanting to solve the problems of South Africa without playing the theatrics of political parties looking at the next election. In fact, they should actually be looking at the electoral process and making recommendations. For example, do we still need provinces? It's a question they must ask themselves.
Yeah.
The electoral system that we have at the moment is a proportional representation system at national and provincial. Do we want only a constituency-based electoral system? Society must pronounce upon that. The outcomes may be very, very different. But these are the kind of things people need to debate, need to take forward. It's not only redressing the issues of the past and the people that are still in poverty at the moment. That is an important issue to address. But how do we address it? Who to address it to? And the question, of course, then is linked to where our foreign allegiances lie. Now, South Africa adopted the non-aligned movement position. And I think we must thank Nkrumah and Nasser and the president of Indonesia at the time that came up with this vision of non-alignment. Because it meant we didn't have to take the side of the East or the West. We could choose all our friends, and South Africa has chosen to be friends with everybody.
Except Israel.
Except when we are basing the issue not on the question of interest, because most politics is based upon country and national interest. But there's also the question of values. And it is in Israel, it's the question of values, but not only Israel. It's also the question of Sahrawi in Morocco. So it's not an Israeli thing only that is taken up. The Sahrawi thing becomes as important. The fighting in the DRC becomes as important. And the question of Africa's resolving African challenges within Africa is important. But that then goes to the UN as well. And I think I'm going away from the dialogue.
No, of course. No. Yeah. And I think let's come back after the break, Ambassador, because we want to touch on President Ramaphosa is going to meet with the eminent persons group in terms of this national dialogue. How does he, as the president, lead this national dialogue? Because at the end, he is the head of the state and the first citizen of the country. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to News in Focus. Ambassador Dangor, you were saying that instead of being President Ramaphosa being the leader of the national dialogue, and I was saying before we went to the break, as the head of the state, one would expect him to be leading these discussions. You were saying he should be the recipient. Why?
He should be the recipient of the outcomes of the dialogue, because you would have to be the implementer thereof. And this national dialogue must be all the motor forces in South Africa reevaluating, reformulating policy, and making resolution that can be taken up by the state, then led by the president, to take up what comes from the national dialogue. But we need to kindle South African patriotism. We need to kindle one South Africa, non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic, non-sectarian. In this instance, take forward what is the trade unions going to say to the national dialogue. They need to look at all of their issues within the trade union and workers' movements. How are farm workers being treated at the moment? That's an issue that they need to take up. The whole question of business and how business is conducted. The whole question of BE, BBE needs to be looked at, and South Africa needs to give expression. But the totality of the motor forces in South Africa needs to give expression to how to take forward, to reevaluate and reformulate policy regarding all of those matters.
Ambassador, you mentioned something there, of course, about the addressing of the past, and you said it is important, but surely to path away for the future, the past must be addressed. I want to take, for example, President Cyril Ramaphosa at the end of April said that the TRC commissions, those inquiries are going to return so that accountability can be brought back. Many families, and I hosted a panel discussion with two individuals who would like to see accountability being done. So, for example, there can be reconciliation, so the forgiveness can be there, but not forgetting what had happened needs to be obviously implemented. I'm just mentioning that as one part of it. Obviously, there's the land issue and so on and so forth. But how important would it be to address the past, to path that way for the future?
When I was a member of parliament, I wrote to the Minister of Justice requesting information regarding Timol, Imam Harun, Lawrence Nzanga, who was very close to me, was also killed in detention, John Foster Square, and the Kredok 4, amongst others. Of course, the reply came from the NPA through the minister. And Yasmin Sukas said to me, it's a very weak reply. It looks like the NPA is not very enthusiastic about prosecuting the TRC crimes. Now, the question is, and I don't know, it's a question for the NPA to answer, is how enthusiastic were they then? How enthusiastic are they now about addressing those particular questions? And some of the people within the state come from that old state and may still be guilty of those issues. Now, of course, if we go back to the original motivation for the TRC, it was to get confession, to get truth, to gain forgiveness from the people that you had hurt, and to bring about reconciliation within society, instead of going the Nuremberg way, which happened in Nazi Germany, is to go the TRC way of actually trying the South African way of forgiving and forming an alliance and coming together as South Africans in that particular way. But it does mean that those who are not forgiven, who had not fully confessed, must be prosecuted.
Ambassador, currently now, the criminal justice system, and this is obviously going to be very important in this national dialogue. The criminal justice system is going through a very difficult time. Public trust in the South African Police Service, after hearing Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's press conference last week, a lot of the trust has evaporated. It seems that South Africans really are looking at the criminal justice system and all of these authorities and saying, can we trust them? This is going to be important in this national dialogue, because without a safe and secure South Africa, pathing the way forward is going to be even more difficult.
The Speaker of Parliament has appointed 3 committees to look at within their jurisdictions, both collectively and individually, at what Mkhwanazi had said. And I think we must allow for that process to unfold. I also listened to Chris Nissen the other day from the Human Rights Commission, who actually supported the same process and saying, and Chris Nissen said a very, very, very important thing: let us be patriotic, let us give this thing a chance, let the investigation be given a chance so that we can get an outcome. But if we all make statements before the time, we're actually prejudging the issue. And let us allow that to happen, to actually gain the confidence of everybody. Now, of course, there are different kinds of confidences in South Africa. There's my confidence, there's your confidence, and
everyone else's,
and there's everyone else's
yeah,
confidence.
Sure. There's a private members bill that's sitting, and I think it was mentioned in Parliament to allow there to be an establishment of an anti-corruption body, something very similar to the Scorpions, which of course was scrapped after 2009. This would obviously be part of the dialogue, because I think what South Africans want also is an effective anti-corruption body that can stamp on crime, whether it's organized or even blue-collar crime. What's your take on that private members bill that's sitting in Parliament right now, for somebody who's, of course, sat in the legislations before?
I think perceptions are different things. Some people do things for political advantage and not really to bring about justice. I want to win the next election, so I bring this bill. But I think we need to look at the motivation and whether members of Parliament will look at that. But I think coming out of this dialogue, there needs to be a statement of intent regarding the question of morality. Now, it is not only the question of corruption, it is morality itself.
Sure.
When somebody is driving by and we stop by a traffic officer who then wants coffee money, and the person gives him coffee money, is that not part of the morality that we're talking about?
Of course.
Now, the perception that is being created, particularly in the West, and with deliberate, I would say, is that Africa and Africans are corrupt.
Yeah.
Or anybody that is not from the West, the South Asians are corrupt. So that is the perception that is created. We need to change that perception. We need to bring the morality back into our society. Now, the morality back in society is not only the guy or the captain who's taken for some kind of thing. It is me and you that gives the traffic officer his coffee or tea money. So we need this, and the faith-based communities need to engender the sense of morality back into society.
After the break, I wrap up my conversation with Ambassador Mohammed Dangor. What can we as South Africans look forward to the national dialogue? And can this discussions amongst various sectors of society bring about the necessary change? Do stay tuned. Welcome back to News in Focus. Ambassador Dangor, I want to touch on this dialogue that's coming up. So a lot of people, when it of course got released, I was speaking amongst friends and family, amongst certain colleagues, and the question of, is this another talk shop? Surely this time around it can't be.
I would hope not.
Yeah.
I would hope that people would take the Harare Declaration, its resolution, take the Conference for a Democratic Future that was held internally, adopting the Harare Declaration and its principles, take what the PAC's statements were at that particular point in time, take what the Black Consciousness Movement and that was about, review all of those documents, review all of the statements, and review all of the policy positions that was there. Look at its relevance today, because society develops and it goes along. Times change and it goes along. Reformulate policy and put that as recommendations to the state to adopt. So covering everything from what you would call corruption, but more importantly, about one South Africa, one patriotic state that belongs to all who live in it. And I think that is the important outcome that we should be looking for. But we should not predetermine the outcome. The outcome needs to be... Now, of course, you have 10 months.
Yeah.
The launch, 10 months thereafter for the adoption. Within those 10 months, civil society, whether you are the cricket club or the hockey club in Benoni, bringing your position through the sports federations, should all come together and get a statement from those particular sectors to bring to the national dialogue so the expression can be given to what people would want to come out of the dialogue to be presented.
10 months.
Yeah.
Is that enough time?
Well, when we took the Freedom Charter, we took 1 year.
Well, so we're close to that, yeah.
Yeah, but now we have technology.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Let alone AI.
Yeah. Oh, let's hope no, it doesn't become AI.
No, of course, I would like to think that won't be the case. But 10 months, is that enough time to get everything? Because there's a myriad of problems in South Africa, even though there's some good in this country. There's a myriad of problems that we're having.
We have problems, but we also have goodness. And we don't recognize the goodness that we have in this country. We have institutions, Section 9 institutions that look at things that very few other countries have got.
The fact that we have elections.
Yeah.
Democratic elections.
Yeah. I'm hoping that we will continue having democratic elections. But I also hope that we can come together as one state and that we don't give expression to narrow nationalism, excluding what people term as minorities and the rise of tribalism. I think we need to look at that very carefully. Unless we look at those issues as one South Africa, one patriotic state, instead of the theatrics that are being played by politicians at the moment, we will not achieve. And of course, then it will be a waste of time.
You mentioned patriotism. Throughout the interview, you've stressed on the importance of patriotism. The 49 Afrikaner families that have left. We saw earlier on in the year AfriForum going to Washington, clearly undermining the state. We've seen, as you mentioned, the rise of tribalism. And it puts into context where we are as patriotic South Africans. It's not just about sport. When the Proteas or the Springboks or Bafana win, we see patriotism there, but patriotism needs to be in other societies also. Can this national dialogue reaffirm that patriotism, bring back that euphoria we had experienced in '94 and for those few years that we had as South Africans?
I would hope that it would do that. We thought we had dealt with the issue of narrow nationalism, racism, and tribalism prior to 1994. Obviously, we had not gone deep enough to deal with that, and it has re-emerged. Let me, on the side, just say something.
Sure.
I was sitting in Libya once, tearing my hair out, trying to understand why people speak the same language, have the same faith, except for a few Khawarij, have the same school of thought even. Why are they killing each other? And I was talking to the Algerian ambassador in Libya, and he said to me, "You will not understand." And he went to go and fetch me an old book called Al-Muqaddimah from Ibn Khaldun, wherein he mentions good solidarity and bad solidarity, and what constitutes good solidarity and what constitutes bad solidarity. Now, that happens throughout the world. It happens in Syria now. It happens in Libya. Libya is still a failed state now.
Sure.
And I hope we don't go in that particular direction. Because some people are trying to engineer regime change in this country, as they did in Libya, as they did in Iraq, as they did elsewhere. And I hope that they don't succeed, and they're a very small minority. But I think the importance of patriotism, of one South African identity, of course, various cultural use to that, you can't ignore that. And it's important to manage that, becomes important. It is not to deny that tribalism doesn't exist. It is how you manage it that becomes important. And with that, I was appealing again. Let us make this dialogue our rebirth of a patriotic South Africa where we have one value system.
Ambassador, to close the conversation off, this, of course, is going to be public discussion, citizens involved. It will have to go to Parliament, to various legislations, and then decisions will have to be made. surely there is a hope that this does not take long, because if the citizens are allowed to have these conversations, they're going to be saying, we need this to be expedited. I know it's going to be very difficult for that to happen, given that you just can't take a magic wand and all of a sudden things are going to change. But the time frame to have what the citizens have mentioned and say, let's turn it around, but in a way, in an effective way, that this country can move forward in a positive way.
We have the experience. Prior to 1994, we had an apartheid system. From the declaration of the freeing of the liberation movements, the Harare Declaration, the Conference for a Democratic Future, to the adoption of a non-racial, non-sexist democratic constitution in 1994 was not that long in history. We've done it before, we can do it again.
Ambassador Dangor, always a pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
Jazakallah so much for joining us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's Ambassador Mohammed Dangor, of course, just sharing his thoughts on the upcoming national dialogue. I think as South Africans, all we can hope for is that this dialogue will bring about the necessary changes that we need in this country. There's a lot of good in this country, so much of positivity. We need to make sure that the imbalance of good being on top and hopefully nothing bad being at the bottom occurs. That's all we have for you on News in Focus from myself, Faraz Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.